Hola a todos, buenos días y bienvenidos al podcast de Aprende Más Inglés. Como siempre, soy Daniel Welsh de aprendemasingles.com, el mejor sitio en todo Internet para aprender inglés. Este podcast te ayudará a hablar inglés como un nativo. Vamos allá. Hey everybody, it's Daniel, as usual, here in the beautiful city of Barcelona. Today, we're going to try something different with the podcast. We're going to do a lesson in English, and I'm going to talk about a very important topic. I'm going to talk about my love story with the Spanish language. Basically, I'm going to talk about how learning Spanish changed my life and how learning a language can change your life, because it's a very important thing. You should definitely make all the effort you can to become bilingual or trilingual, as the case may be, because it really does change everything. In fact, if I can do this, anybody can do this, because I didn't have any real specific advantage while trying to learn Spanish. All I did was I was willing to be wrong, and I was willing to look stupid in front of friends and complete strangers, and that's how I learned. So hey, let's talk about how I learned Spanish. If you want, you can go to my website, aprendemasingles.com/42, el número 42, porque este es el capítulo 42 del podcast. Y ahí puedes leer un poco esta historia. But going back to English, I'm going to talk to you today in English, and it's going to be great. So, if I can do this, anyone can do this, because I am just some guy who grew up in the middle of the desert in Arizona. I grew up in a very boring place in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, about 3 hours from the border with Mexico. When I was about 5 years old, in first grade or something similar, I remember I was waiting for the bus in the desert, as we did. We would just sit there and we would wait for the bus, and there were a couple of Mexican kids who were going to school with me, and I didn't know anything about Mexico or what, different countries were, because I was 5 or 6. But I did understand that they spoke some other language, and I thought it would be cool if they could teach me some bad words in Spanish. And so I asked. I think I only knew 2 bad words in English at that point in my life. So I asked them how to say shit. And one of the kids, his name was Noel, and he told me shite. And obviously that's not true. But I believed that for many years. And yeah, so that was my first contact with Spanish. After that, I had a crush on a girl in my first grade class who was also from Mexico. And, she was dark-haired and dark-skinned and beautiful. And I was hopelessly in love with her in a first grade sort of way. And yeah, I'm not sure we ever really talked, but I admired her accent, and I was contemplating, even at age 5, what it meant to be, Spanish speaking and all of that, and thinking, it would be cool if I could speak Spanish. Maybe I could impress my first grade crush. Anyway, after that, we ended up learning a little bit of Spanish in elementary school, but it was very basic. I learned how to say Me llamo Donito. They told me that the equivalent of the name Daniel in Mexico is Donito, which I did not like at all. It sounded like Dorito or something like that. But they told me Donito is the best they could do. I guess, Daniel is also a Spanish name, but whatever. The teacher was from Ecuador, and so we learned a little bit of Spanish with her. We learned how to say things like hipopótamo and elefante and jirafa. We learned how to say me llamo Donito y tengo 7 años. And that was about as far as we went with Spanish. We also watched a TV show that was called Perro Pepe. And Perro Pepe was basically a large gentleman who was dressed like a dog and who would go and have adventures in Miami, I suppose, where they would, have little adventures and speak a little bit of Spanish, and it was cute. Anyway, I thought that Spanish was pretty stupid at that time because I couldn't see any reason why I would need to say jirafa, elefante, or hipopótamo in a foreign language. We had lots of things in the desert of Arizona that were important for me to know about, and elephants, giraffes, and hippopotamuses, or hippopotami, were not among the most important concerns in my, my pre-adolescent life. So I thought it was kind of dumb. But anyway, continuing on in my life learning Spanish, around 1995, still a very long time ago, I was in high school. I was just starting high school, and just because it was the recommended thing to do, I took Spanish. We only had two languages in my school. We had Spanish and we had French at this time. And I was also not too excited about it there either. My Spanish teachers were better than a lot of my other teachers, but I was still finding it kind of pointless. And there were things, when in English you learn the conjugations of verbs. You learn to say speak, spoke, spoken, break, broke, broken, wake, woke, woken, take, took, taken, and things like that. What we learned is how to conjugate the verbs in Spanish. So we learned like the endings of the words. So it's o as a amos ais an, o as a amos ais an. I remembered them like they were a rap song. These are just the endings. Yo hablo, tú hablas, él habla, nosotros hablamos, vosotros habláis, ellos hablan, o as a amos ais an. Those are the endings of the AR verbs in present. What I learned many years later is that Spanish is much more difficult than English in these things. In fact, it's about 50 times more difficult in grammar, because in English, we only really have a few forms. In Spanish, you have dozens and dozens of forms for every single verb. So be thankful that you know Spanish as a native language. We have to study a lot just to remember basic verb conjugations. Anyway, when we were learning that, the teachers would always say things like, oh, you think this is difficult, but soon we will learn the subjunctive. And that's where things get really, really complicated. And they were right. The subjunctive is worse. I still am not certain that I'm using the subjunctive correctly. And this is many years later. Anyway, we did this in primary school, and then we did this in high school. I learned some things, and I generally felt it was boring, and I wasn't paying much attention. But in 2003, my entire life changed. How did your life change, Daniel? Well, guess. I was back in Arizona. I had attempted to study a degree at university. It didn't go very well, so I was back in Arizona, and I got a job working in a restaurant. And the restaurant industry in Arizona, since we are a state on the border between the United States and Mexico, in a lot of the restaurants, you've got, Mexican people working in the kitchen, for example. And so, you might be in a restaurant where generally you would talk to the customers in English, but back in the kitchen, everything happens in Spanish. This is very typical in Arizona, and I assume in other states in the U.S. it's similar. Maybe not like Wyoming or Nebraska, but the border states, Texas, California, things like that, it's very common. So I found myself working in this restaurant, in this kitchen. And after a couple of days, I just thought, I studied Spanish in high school. I thought it was stupid, but what's really stupid is spending, years learning something that you're never going to use. So I'm going to use my Spanish. I started using my Spanish. I started speaking Spanish to the guys working there in the restaurant. And my life has never been the same. It was very, very fun being able to use a foreign language. I had no idea that it was going to be this much fun. That's when I discovered the difference between speaking a foreign language and studying a foreign language. I highly recommend that you study a foreign language. But more than that, you need to speak a foreign language, because if you don't speak a foreign language, you are going to have difficulty ever learning to speak a foreign language. You learn to speak by speaking. And it's one of those things that I have to tell everybody. You probably, if you know some English, you probably don't need to do all the grammar exercises. You probably just need to learn to speak. And I tell people all the time, you're never going to get to a point where you just feel comfortable speaking unless you practice speaking. You're never going to get to a point where you understand everything and say everything perfectly unless you practice speaking a lot. So just practice speaking, practice speaking, practice speaking. So, I was there in this restaurant and I had a lot of fun with the guys. There was a guy named Cristobal, there was a guy named Ramon, and there was a guy named, I've forgotten, something else. And they were all from the northern states of Mexico. I believe they were all from Sonora, actually. And they inspired me also to go traveling in Mexico. Traveling in Mexico for an American person was a shocking idea at this point. I told people, I'm going to go to Mexico, and everybody said, this is very dangerous. You should not do it. Americans don't travel internationally very much. So even though Mexico was literally 3 hours away, or maybe 2.5, people did not go to Mexico. It was just kind of considered to be a scary, dangerous place just to the south of us where you should not go. And I went, and it was awesome. And I spent a couple of weeks just having an experience wandering around in the north of Mexico, in Sonora, in Chihuahua, in Sinaloa a little bit. This was about the year 2003. And yeah, it was awesome. And what I learned from all of this is that it's very important to put things into practice, to put what you've learned into practice as soon as you can. Because I was working in this restaurant with other people who had gone to my high school. We had all studied Spanish. Theoretically, we all knew enough Spanish that we could start speaking. But for some reason, I was the only one who started speaking Spanish in this situation. Other people were embarrassed. They felt bad about making mistakes. They didn't want to look stupid. I'd never thought I looked stupid. I thought, this is awesome. I'm speaking a language. And so I'm the only one out of these people who now speaks good Spanish. You can do this in your life too. You can find people who speak English where you are, and you can speak English with them. There are a lot of English-speaking people out there in the world. If they're not in your town, you can definitely find them on the internet. A lot of them are happy to talk. So, I highly recommend that you start speaking as soon as you can. Anyway, I was having a great experience there in the restaurant and all of that, but my life changed a lot soon after that. In 2004, I went to Spain for the first time. I came to Spain for the first time because I'm here in Spain right now. Maybe you can guess how this story goes. But yes, in the summer of 2004, I visited Spain for just about a week, and I met a girl. We were kind of traveling on the same itinerary, so we saw each other in Valencia and in Granada and then also in Madrid. And guess what? I was young and I was stupid, and I thought, hey, maybe I'll move to Spain and be with this girl. This was not the most intelligent decision I ever made, but in the end it worked out really, really well, because later that year, in October 2004, I moved to Spain, and once again, my life changed forever. For one, I found that Spanish is very different than Mexican Spanish. People would laugh at me when I said things that were completely normal in Mexican Spanish. But if you said them in Madrid, it would be like a joke. I found it funny also because I don't care about looking a little bit ridiculous. It doesn't matter. People laugh. I say something stupid, people laugh. I laugh too, and then we're having a great time. We're laughing together. It's a funny joke, and I have no problem. So I recommend you adopt this attitude. It's no problem at all. I moved to Madrid in October 2004. As I say, I found a flat in one of the worst neighborhoods in Madrid. And I had a flatmate who was from Murcia, which is a region in the south of Spain. If you are not from Spain, you might not know. But yeah, Murcia is a region in the south of Spain, and his accent was so strong that I had no idea if he was even speaking Spanish half the time. It was awful. But it was also very educational. We made friends. I don't know how we were friends because I didn't understand anything he said. But we made friends, and it was great. We learned a lot. I learned a lot. After that, with the girl who I moved to Spain for, nothing important happened. But I ended up meeting some other girls, girls named Maria, Spanish girls. And I learned a lot from that too. Spanish girls will get very agitated if you make certain mistakes in their language. You can say stupid things and they might not be happy about it. And then you learn even more because, as I discovered, there's only really two ways to learn something, to get something into your long-term memory. One is strong emotion. If you have a strong emotion attached to it, then you will learn it. And the other one is repetition. So you can repeat, or you can just get a strong emotion. And strong emotion happens a lot if you're, for example, in love, or if you're at least, in bed with someone who speaks your target language. You can learn a lot. I highly recommend that experience too, as long as, your husband, wife, boyfriend, or girlfriend has no problem, or if you're single, for example. Go right ahead and have an adventure. You can learn so much that way too. It's insane. After a while, I ended up breaking up with the Spanish girls, and I ended up having a girlfriend from Italy, the country in the south of Europe. And that was another experience because she also spoke a strange dialect of Italian. It had nothing to do with Italian. It was based on Italian, but it sounded completely different. Her parents also spoke this. I spent a couple of summers, summers and Christmases, in her region of Italy, trying to speak to these people. And it was, once again, a very fun experience. I recommend you do this. I recommend you speak to people as soon as you possibly can in your target language. So what I learned there is that it doesn't particularly matter how the language is written. It can sound completely different, and you need to just try to imitate the sounds that people are making more than read things out loud. This is also important in learning English, because English is pronounced very different than it's spelled. So you need to do both of these things. Anyway, in Italy, at that point, I was, having a lot of fun. And I was learning a lot about how languages are learned too, because even with my very basic level of Italian, I was able to speak to people and have fun there too. Afterwards, we were on the way back, and we were on the way back to Spain from Italy, and our flight was delayed. Our flight was delayed for a couple of hours. And I was there with my girlfriend, now my ex-girlfriend, then my girlfriend. We were there in the airport in some town in Italy. I have no idea what town, maybe like Bologna or something. And I just had the idea I needed to write a book about how languages are learned, how people like you can learn languages. And I did it. I wrote 6 claves para aprender inglés. You can buy it on Amazon. I think it's a good book. And yes, you can read that book, and I talk about everything I know, or everything I knew at that point, about how languages are learned, because it's very important to do things the way that successful language learners do things, not to do them, not to do what everybody who's not speaking English is doing. Find the people who actually learned English well and do what they're doing. It might be difficult. It might be uncomfortable. You might say a couple of stupid things and look a little bit silly in front of some friends, coworkers, or complete strangers. It doesn't matter. Nobody's thinking about you that much. So don't worry. Be happy. Just please start speaking. And I guess that's the story for today. I wrote the book, 6 claves para aprender inglés, which you can buy on Amazon. I wrote the book in 2012. Since then, I have learned a lot more, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Go to aprendemasingles.com/42, el número 42, porque este es el capítulo número 42 del podcast, para leer un poco esta historia con un poco más de detalle. Y bueno, espero que pases un gran día. Suscríbete al podcast en la plataforma que quieras, que siempre estoy haciendo nuevos capítulos. Y nada más por hoy. Que pases un muy buen día, estés donde estés. Bye. Gracias por escuchar. Como siempre, puedes pasar por mi web aprendemasingles.com. Para mucho más, tengo vocabulario, expresiones para hablar, phrasal verbs, gramática, pronunciación y mucho más en la web. Nada más por hoy. Espero que pases un muy buen día. Hasta la próxima.